everyone. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'd just like to say a very warm welcome to everyone here and everyone online. This is our third West Yorkshire Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee meeting for transport on Thursday, the 20th of January 2022, and the very first meeting this year. So Happy New Year, everyone. And at our first meeting this year, we're going to be joined a little bit later by our Mayor, Tracy Braben, who we will be asking questions to about all things transport. So in the meantime, I'd just like to invite all our members from across West Yorkshire and all the officers on the call just to introduce themselves, but just for the benefits of everyone attending online and for anybody who's new to our panel as well. So if I can start, I'm Councillor Amanda Parsons-Hulse from Worley Ward, from Calderdale Council, and I'm the chair of the Transport Scrutiny Committee. Who would like to go next?
Shall I come in, Chair?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Councillor Anthony Smith from the Lindley Ward in Kirklees.
Thank you, Anthony.
Councillor Peter Clark from Craven Ward in Bradford Council.
Thank you, Peter.
I'm Robert Finnegan. I am a councillor for the Morley North Ward on Leeds City Council.
Good morning.
Councillor Paul Ray from Huntsville Riverside Ward in Leeds.
Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moortown Ward, Leeds.
Councillor Stephen Fenton from City of York Council.
Councillor Donald for Kirklees Council on Valley South Ward.
Councillor Dot Foster, Strawberry Bridge in Calderdale.
Morning. Sorry. I'm Councillor Mohsin Hussain from Keighley Central at Bradford Council.
Good morning, Mohsin. Deputy Chair, would you like to go next?
Yeah, well, yes. Sorry, I was trying to butt in there, but I've mistimed it. Yeah, Councillor Peter Caffrey, North Arham and North Arham Ward in Calderdale.
Thank you, Peter.
Will I go next?
Yeah, go for it, Harry.
Councillor Ari Ellis, Wakefield.
Okay, who's next?
Councillor Ruth Wood at Bradford Council.
Hi, Ruth. Have we got everybody?
Shall we introduce ourselves as officers if all the members have introduced themselves? I'm Dave Pearson, Director of Transport Property Services at the Combined Authority.
Thank you. And hello everyone, I'm Helen Elton. I'm Interim Head of Transport Policy at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi, Helen. Khalid?
I'm Khalid Barum, Statutory Scrutiny Officer at the Combined Authority.
Okay, I think we're all here, good to go. So just before the meeting, I'd just like to introduce a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. This is the first meeting we've had on Zoom, so I might not see everybody on the screen. And there's quite a few of us here today. So if I can just ask, I'll ask at the beginning of each item who would like to ask a question on that item. And if you could all raise your hands at that time, and then Khalid and I'll make a list. And then at the end, I'll ask again if anyone's got any further comments, just so, because it's quite hard to keep an eye on who's on the screen. If you can please indicate that you want to speak by using your hand symbol, that'd be really helpful. So if you can find out where your hand symbol is. And it'd be helpful for the sound quality as well if everybody remained on mute until it's your turn to speak. Thank you, members. Okay, so if you are watching this meeting online and you would like to access our agenda pack, where you can find all the reports for the meeting today, you can find it on West Yorkshire Combined Authority website. Just search for the the Transport Scrutiny Committee, and today's date, which is the 20th of January. And there you'll find all the links to all the items that we'll be talking about today. Okay, let's start. So apologies. Have we got any apologies, Secretary?
Only apologies from Councillor Jackie Ferguson and Councillor David Jones is substituting for her.
That's great, thank you. And declarations of pecuniary interests, members. Is there anybody who has any interests that they wish to declare at this point on the agenda? No, I take that as a no. Thank you, members. Okay, so exclusion of press and public. Secretary, can you please confirm that there's no items of exclusion to press or public?
There are none.
Okay, great. And moving on to item 4, minutes of last meeting held on the 18th of November. As this meeting is not classed as being quorate because we're online, as opposed to in person, so we'll bring these minutes forward to the next meeting. But in the meantime, are there any comments or amendments or anything, members, that you would like to speak on? No, great. Okay then, thank you, members. So let's move on. Item 5, Chair's comments and update. I'm just doing a little time check. Okay, so I had a meeting with the other 2 scrutiny chairs, and we discussed basically this new scrutiny process for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and it was suggested at the end of the first year that we have an evaluation process, which we would really appreciate if you guys would feed into. So how you think this year's gone? Is there anything that you would like to change or what could be improved as a scrutiny process? So if you could send those over to me, that would be great. It could just be one line, you know, it doesn't have to be a big report or anything. There's something that you think that we could do better, that would be fab. Okay, we also discussed a scrutiny scoring system for major projects. I'm aware that there's hundreds of projects at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and a scoring system would really help us as members to be able to prioritise which projects to scrutinise. So this scoring system may already exist within the project appraisal team. So we discussed maybe how we could make that, we could tailor it to a scoring scheme that would be more specific around scrutiny. So for example, we talked about maybe we could have budget, time, you know, for projects on time, or how that affects residents, or any sort of disruption to services, or even, you know, West Yorkshire Combined Authority's reputation, maybe the consequences of failure, or any other risks involved. So we could tailor these factors to the scrutiny committee that they're applicable to, and then weight each one. So, for example, if something was really important, then it might have a 50% rate weighting. And maybe the other factors just sort of have 20 or 10 or whatever, and then we would make a decision based on those factors. The last stage of the process obviously would be to prioritise which projects that we thought would be best to scrutinise, depending on the resources available, obviously, and of course the much needed enthusiasm of our members. You know, we rely on your enthusiasm as well. So we're still in the development stage of this scrutiny process. So if anyone else has got any ideas, maybe you've got a lot of experience in project management or something, that it would be great if you could feed into this, because the discussions are still ongoing. Okay. So the other thing that I've done since I last saw you is I went to an event. It's called Motorbike Live at the Birmingham NEC. I was invited to go in December. It was a day trip. Not my kind of thing. Admittedly, I'm not a biker. I live with somebody who's a motorbiker, but it's only a recent thing, so it's not a big biking thing in our family. But anyway, I agreed to go, and I did think it would be useful for this role, this committee as well. As a local authority councillor, you probably, as well as I do, get lots of complaints about motorcyclists and the misuse of motorcycles. as well as, well, at least we do in my area, we have quite a lot of complaints. So I really didn't know what to expect. I was very pleasantly surprised that when I got there, that my image of the stereotypical biker was completely shattered by this visit. And I was surrounded by quite a lot of professional people of all ages, shapes and sizes, and from all walks of life, many of whom wanted to make a difference to the environment, which I was really surprised about as well. So I found out some really interesting facts while I was there. Did you know that the distance travelled by motorcycles in Yorkshire and the Humber is 0.2 billion miles? I had no idea. And there are over 115,000 licensed motorcycles in the region. So that's like 3.7% of registered vehicles in our region. And I was also told that studies showed that if we had a 10% shift of modal travel, so from cars, for example, to motorcycles, that we would reduce congestion for all of our road users by up to 40%. That's huge. That's a massive shift. So apparently as well, it would reduce emissions of air pollutants and CO2. And I was also told there's been studies done to suggest that people who ride motorbikes to work are less stressed than car drivers. I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but apparently that's the case. So, and they also make safer drivers behind the wheel because they're aware all the time of what's next to them, what's around them. So yeah, it was really interesting. I was quite surprised. I had to get out of my comfort zone for that one. So given the apparent benefits of this mode of transport, it'd be really interesting to understand how this mode of transport is incorporated as a mode of travel in our transport plan, but it's not something that we're going to discuss today. I just thought it was a really interesting trip. Okay, so how are we doing for time? So our mayor is going to join us today at 20 past, so we've got another 5 minutes. Let's move on to item 6. So item 6 is transport network and projects update. So it really is just an update, this one. We requested this information in the last meeting, and it's just background information really of everything that's going on in the world of transport here in West Yorkshire Combined Authority and also the Transport Committee. So we can discuss these facts and figures more fully in our next meeting, or maybe even later on in this one. However, if you've got any pressing questions or if there's any points of clarification that you need at this moment in time so we can move forward to ask Tracy, our mayor, the questions, then now's probably a good time to ask, although we are going to be asking these questions in a bit. So, Councillor Stephen Fenton, would you like to come in?
Yeah.
And Robert Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. It may be a question for the Mayor, but paragraph 2.7 of the report talks about challenges that the bus operators are facing, and as we know in many areas, temporary emergency changes to service frequency were introduced on the back of the recruitment and other challenges. It would be helpful to understand across the city region the extent to which those temporary emergency service frequency reductions are being reversed, or whether it's likely that operators will try to make those reduced frequencies the permanent frequencies. But we can either pick that up now or in the question time session. I don't mind. Thank you.
Chair, do you want me to say something around that one now?
Chair, mine's a related issue about recruitment of bus drivers, where we are with that. So it's the same section. It's the same sort of concern, really. How are we doing in terms of the recruitment of bus drivers, which links in with my colleague's question. Thank you.
But the fact of the matter is,
Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Chair.
Thank you. I was just saying I'm struggling to see who's speaking because I'm on so many screens. Who was it that just spoke?
It was Councillor Finnegan.
Councillor Finnegan again. Thank you. Okay, well let's keep those questions then for buses, if that's okay.
Yeah, it might be just worth touching on those before the Mayor joins us.
Okay,
I think I mean we are in a fairly fast-moving situation in terms of the impacts of the pandemic on public transport generally, buses and rail. And I think, as we said in the report, and I think as the councillors point out, the immediate effect of sickness and isolation on all sorts of public services and businesses is one of two factors that's influencing the bus service and necessitating some emergency timetable changes. The other one is a longer one, which I think Councillor Finnegan refers to, which we have been flagging to members for several months now, and that is the amount of movement in the labour market, particularly around driving jobs, it's actually created a shortfall of bus drivers, and that's been a bit of a problem. I think the immediate impact of the pandemic, hopefully, as we're seeing the overall pandemic numbers beginning to have looked like they're peaked, and the isolation period's been changed. Hopeful that it will start resolving itself over the next month or so. Still leaves the overall labour market issues. The feedback we're getting from the bus operators is that whilst they've still got recruitment difficulties, they are actually recruiting drivers into the process. There's a long time lag to get them trained up and actually fully functional. Sometimes they lose some of those during that time lag, and that's been a bit of a problem. I think in summary, I don't think the situation regarding the driver recruitment and retention has got worse. I think it's still an issue, still a problem. I think Councillor Fenton raises a very pertinent question, and one we're working through with bus operators now. I think we would want to see the temporary reductions in frequencies to be a relatively short-term thing, but we are seeing one or two behaviours from one or two bus operators which suggests that they're actually reducing their overall function and output, and that's giving cause for concern, particularly within the Wakefield and Kirklees areas, where we've had notification that Arriva are making some service changes, and they made some service changes last year, which have reduced their network a little bit. So it's worrying that coming out of this, we find pressure to reduce the network coming from bus operators who will say that their viability position is threatened by the reduced patronage that the pandemic's caused, and there's that is a factor, a very big factor in terms of the reduced demand. Until the end of March, we still have emergency funding arrangements both from government and from the combined authority, which is hopefully protecting them from the financial impacts of that. But yeah, these are bumpy times and probably will be for the next couple of months.
Thank you, Dave. I'm aware that that Tracy Braben, our mayor, is in the waiting room, so I don't want to keep her waiting any longer. We do have item 7, which is the work programme. Should we do that at the end, Khaled, or shall I just move through that quickly?
I mean, we can do it at the end, but there's nothing much. It's just a.
Okay, well, basically our next meeting is on the 10th of March, and we're going to be looking at the rail network and the rail reform. So if you've got any questions about that, again, fire them over to us. Yeah, we've looked at different key themes such as behaviour change, and it's definitely a subject that we want to continue with, and also the seldom heard groups. So, but we could look at workshopping some of those themes in the following year. Okay, let's move on to our major item. Let's bring in Tracy.
Morning all.
Good morning, Tracy Bobo, and good morning to our Mayor. Hello. So welcome. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning at the Transport Scrutiny Committee and ask you all things transport. So welcome. So we've got a series of questions for you based on 5 main themes, which are Mayor's Combined Authorities powers, buses, mass transit system, rail, and active travel. It feels like a quiz show now. I'm really sorry about that.
That's all right.
20 questions starting from now.
Thanks,
Okay.
Amanda.
You're welcome. So, okay, so we're going to move through these topics separately, okay, and dedicate around 15 to 20 minutes on each, if that's okay with everybody. So, as I have explained to the members, we're going to do the first item, and then we're going to make a list of people's names of who wants to ask questions. And if anything comes up at the end, then I'll ask again at the end, just so to reduce any confusion. Okay, so let's move on to the first item. Mayors and Combined Authorities powers from a transport perspective. So who would like to ask a question on this item? If you'd like to raise your hand. If you don't know where the hand symbol is, just put your hand up on the screen and we'll see you.
I think Dot has her hand up. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, so we've got a question from Dot. Is there anybody else? There's Councillor Ray. And is there anybody else on the other screen? No. Okay, so Dot, would you like to start us off?
Morning, Tracy. Thank you for joining us. This could really fit into one of two groups, either this one or rail. But I'd really like to know, having read the paper we've had on the impact that the limitations of HS2 have had, I'd love to know if there's anything that you can do to help push forward the electrification of the Calder Valley line. It goes from Leeds to Bradford. I think the commitment is Leeds to Bradford, but down here in the valley we're getting out as usual. So it would be really good if there's anything that you can do in your powers to help push that forward. Thank you.
Do you want to take both at the same time, Chair?
Yeah, I was going to say that's more of a rail question, Doc. Can we hold that one? Do you mind if we hold that one for the rail?
Yeah, sure. It could either fit into one or either, I thought, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Ray.
Yeah, I feel like probably mine is that crosses a couple of different areas. Tracy, in terms of your powers, what influence or powers would you have to try and improve the linkage services via bus or train to some of the more rural and outer communities, particularly those that are poorly serviced by current public transport, and what powers do you have to try and move that agenda forward?
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for the invitation for me to join you today, and it's great to be with you again. And also thank you for all the work that you're doing in your communities. It's been a really tough few months. Today is the first day it's working back in the office, so hopefully there will be changes in our communities, city centres, on our transport networks and so on as the months roll on. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to getting a good grilling, so get your questions ready. Councillor Ray, regarding rural, I absolutely get the poor service that our rural communities are served. I'm not sure Slowett is regarded as rural, but there are villages around where I live in particular that don't get a bus service at all, let alone 1 or 2 a day. So we're really looking at this in our innovation part of the transport offer, and in East Leeds rather, we have a pilot where you can call and get the bus. So it's a demand-led service. that, of course, you might not always have a bus at the end of your road, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that wherever you live, you still have access to public transport, but you might have to access it in a different way. And we've put into our bus service improvement plan, which has gone to government, an element of that where our rural communities are going to be supported. But you're absolutely right. There are lots of communities that rely on taxis and you know, have to walk to work you know, a couple of miles because there's no transport. So we're definitely looking at that. And being the Member of Parliament, as I've mentioned before, for Batley and Spen, I really do get that sense that, well, the cities are okay because they've got these, you know, into the city centre commuter links. We don't have anything between villages, and I think that's something that's important because it isn't just about the economy, it's about the well-being of citizens, that you can get to visit a friend, you can get to your lunch club if you're someone who lives alone and is an older person. If you're a student, you can get to the local art college if you've got a course that you'd like to do in the evening, and that the bus service doesn't end at 4:30. So we're definitely looking at that, and part of the BSIP is extending the hours of which bus routes operate as well. But of course, you'll know, Councillor Ray, that I don't run the buses, so we have a challenge on our hands. The enhanced partnership, which we embarked on, whilst also allocating £1 million to investigate what public control would look like. We're in a timescale given to us by government, but we're hoping that that enhanced partnership will also give us a more of a say on persuading the bus companies to to support those rural communities, but also where bus companies have not delivered, we have been picking up the slack. So the 205 route was cancelled to Pudsey, and we are now paying for that route because we know that it's important for the citizens that live there. So we are trying to do what we can within our current remit with ambitions for the future.
Thank you, Tracy. I noticed that we are off-piste.
Yes, apologies. Sorry, Amanda. Sorry, Chair. But would you like me to answer Councillor Foster's question, or shall we wait?
No, I think what I'm going to give you a couple of questions on what power, because I think there's a misunderstanding. I haven't really explained what I meant really about powers. So basically, having been an MP for several years, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm wondering what influence and soft power you have. Okay, that is the sort of thing about power I'm thinking of. And also, as we know, there are 5 leaders of all the councils who have the authority to make decisions within their local authorities and their own councils. I'm wondering what the leaders do to support you as a mayor in your role and how you all work together. Where is the power in that situation? That's the second question. And the third question is, what power would you like to have? If you could have any power you currently don't have, what would you like to have? That's my questions on power.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, the joy of the job, actually, having been an opposition member of Parliament where getting things done was incredibly difficult because you didn't have any power or any money. It was absolutely about trying to get people to work with you. With this role, there is some hard powers, as you mentioned, Chair, but the soft powers are quite extensive and as wide as you would like to use them, actually. So, for example, the soft power, working with other mayors across the region, but also more widely, we have a group of the M8, which is the Labour mayors, and the M10, which includes Andy Street and Ben Houchen, the Conservative mayors. These forums are absolutely brilliant at drawing together that strength in the numbers of people we represent. And let's not forget, 3 out of 5 people in the north have a mayor. my budgets are, if I could ever imagine as a member of parliament, I would have budgets like 38 million of gain share per year in and making those decisions about where that money goes. So I have the soft powers of working with the other mayors, also working with my relationships. I'm lucky that I have some relationships from Parliament, so building on those relationships in my new role. I have relationships with government, so building on those relationships, having people's phone numbers in my phone is always helpful, but also internationally. The soft powers, being able to, for example, go to Glasgow to represent West Yorkshire at COP, to speak on a platform with other mayors from across the world, to share good practice and to celebrate what we're doing here, but also to learn from others, and to be a voice for our region, and also to be able to set the direction of travel in my approach as the first ever woman Metro Mayor in the country. I've also been able to use my soft powers to identify changes, for example, working with the Chief Constable to have misogyny been recorded as a hate crime, through conversations, having those conversations with the Chief Constable, but also bringing together women's groups, bringing together MPs from all stripes, talking about the issues that face women in particular, being able to make relationships around a topic. 51% of the population, of course, that I represent as well. So around a topic draws people in, so I can build those relationships. And I think politics is all about relationship building. So that's important to me. There's the national, the regional, and then the international. Obviously, that international work is being done online as well. When it comes to the leaders, I'm very privileged, actually, that I've got 5 exceptional leaders across the region. They're all Labour, which is helpful that we all are going in the same direction of travel. I don't think of myself as the mayor, as the sort of the pinnacle. I see myself as one of a group of 6. I'm the chair of the leaders group, but we all have an equal stake in the decision making. They are able to share with me best practice, their ideas, and I can then look at those ideas and expand them to a West Yorkshire vision. So my role is across West Yorkshire, the additionality of devolution, the extra money that brings. So for example, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, we wouldn't have had that £830 million without having a mayor, without having a devolution deal. So I'm working with leaders about how we spend that, about our priorities. And what powers would I like further? Well, I'm very excited about and rolling my sleeves up with the powers I have already. But going forward, I have seen that whilst I have adult education authority, being able to decide and support colleges with courses and what will help businesses in our region and that supply and demand. What I have no powers over is 16+ education. So young people will finish school, and then we pick them up in adult education where they may have, lost their way. So it would be great to have powers over sixth forms and going on from 16 up into adult education, and also around climate change. We don't have the powers we need to deliver as swiftly as we would like in our region, and it's quite frustrating, because we're committed to net zero carbon emissions by 2038. So the 2020s has got to be the doing decade. I don't feel I've got the powers. We have to keep going back to government to ask, for example, for electric buses. I would like to be able to say, well, we want the whole fleet electric. Let's find the money. Let's bring in partners. But I can't do that. So my hands are slightly tied. So I don't want to take up all the time that we have on the first question. So I'll end there, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. I noticed that Councillor Clark and Councillor Finnegan both have their hands up. Can I just check? Is it a question about power or rail or something else?
No, it's about power.
Okay, great. Robert, would you like to go first?
Thanks very much. Some of us have been banging on about re-regulating the buses, Brabin, for many years. And Andy Burnham claims to have those particular powers. How quickly can we move to have the same influence on bus services that Mayor Burnham says he's got?
Thank you, Councillor. Manchester are probably 5 years ahead of us. It has taken them all of this time because of the processes that are required to get to this point. So I will be at the point with our timeline dictated to us by government. I will be at the point in 2024 where we're looking at sort of March to be able to make that decision. I will have the evidence in front of me. We will have the work that needs to be done. The T's will be crossed, the I's will be dotted, and I will be able to make that decision whether we go for public control and franchising. There's a whole load of work to do before that, because what I don't want to do is to sit on a principle and wait for that point when I can decide about franchising. What I want to do, because I'm a bus user myself, I want to improve the buses now, today, which is why I've decided to go into that enhanced partnership, whilst also riding two horses, the enhanced partnership and going for public control at the same time. Those two things can run in parallel. This enhanced partnership gives us an opportunity to get more money into our system, and that's where the bus service improvement plan comes in. Now, the government said bus service improvement plan would be 3 billion across the region and across the country, and now we've seen, haven't we, that has been reduced to 1.2 billion. It's still a large amount of money. We are still committed to transformational change in our bus networks. We have a plan on how we're going to do it. We're waiting for government to get back to us on our plan. If memory serves me correctly, it'll be in February, the outcome of our bid. We have been incredibly bold and ambitious in our bid, so I can't imagine we're going to get everything, but we're not going to stand still. And one of the things that really does is a priority for me is capping, because we have seen that those people who have maybe two jobs, two part-time jobs, maybe caring responsibilities, or kids they want to take swimming in the evening by bus, they are paying more than those who do one journey. That's not fair. And if London have a capped system, then we can have a capped system. So we're looking at a cap of 550 at the moment, with the ambition to bring it down to 450. So whilst we haven't got that, we're not where Manchester are at the moment, we are definitely on the journey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Clark, would you like to come in next?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor, for coming today. My question relating, my ward is particularly on the edge of the authority, particularly within Bradford and also the wider Wyker authority. One of the issues a lot of my residents raise is services to outside of the authority, particularly to places such as Skipton and a lot of places within North Yorkshire. My question, therefore, is what are you doing to have more collaborative partnership working, not only with the constituent authorities, but with authorities outside of the Wyker area?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And you'll know that we have a transport relationship with York. And also I'm part of the Yorkshire Leaders Board, so where we work with partners and leaders in North Yorkshire and elsewhere across the region. So we are in relationships with them. But if I could turn to my colleague, Dave, specifically just about the Skipton line, that he may have a little bit more information for me on that, because I'm not across Skipton. Dave, sorry to land you in it there. If you wouldn't mind just...
no, that's absolutely question. That's absolutely fine. I think, as the Mayor's pointed out, obviously we've established a bus service improvement plan, which was submitted to government, as have North Yorkshire County Council and other transport authorities. And in some respects, the onus is on us to see how they mesh together. and clearly in the areas, particularly around our boundaries, then travel demands don't recognise local authority boundaries and absolutely recognise the demand to travel to and from Skipton from the Craven area, the Craven ward of Bradford. So yeah, we do actually quite a lot of collaboration at an officer level between different authorities, and would continue to do so. I think one of the challenges, if we're absolutely honest about these things, is it needs there to be a will on both sides of the boundary to be able to deploy the resources it's got to solving that particular issue. And I think there have been examples over the past where both parties haven't had the same priorities, and that's probably where some of the cross-boundary links have fallen away. But yeah, we will work with North Yorkshire and deliver our respective bus service improvement plans, and hopefully try to do that in a combined way. And one of the things we have done is had a conversation with North Yorkshire around how we might do that once we actually know what the shape of funding is going to be.
Thank you for your question. If I may just quickly add, though, that what is frustrating is the disparity in pricing across the region. So I'm hoping that as we develop our plans, that those conversations, we can get a commonality so that it's not cheaper Manchester to Leeds than Leeds to Manchester, if you see my point. So just to get that, we've a lot to iron out, there's no doubt about it, and it is a challenge, but you shouldn't be penalised if you're going outside of our region because you're crossing a border. Just so there's things that we still obviously will be working on with partners. Thank you for that, Councillor Clark.
So I am wondering, because we're on the subject of buses, whether we should just jump over to buses and stay with buses for. Has anyone got any further questions on buses? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tracy, for coming today. I don't think you've answered this question prior when was asked about buses. But anyway, my question is regarding the pilot that is taking place with regards to the Flexibus. I know it's a pilot at this moment in time, and I'm hoping, like I'm sure you are, that it's successful. And if it is successful, how and when and where will it be rolled out to other places that, you know, it's in Bermintoffs and Richmond Hill at this moment, I believe. And there's lots of places here in Leeds, and I'm sure others in other areas would welcome it if it's successful. So my question is, when will it be rolled out, and how it's going to be rolled out, and you know, the costs for rolling it out? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Hamilton. It's an absolutely excellent question. And this is what I want to see, a more innovative response to our transport challenges. It can't be right that communities are left in an island where they have no access to public transport. So we have seen a decent uptake of the demand-led a network, but I really do want you to get a full answer to the question about the timelines, and if we have identified as yet other areas that could be of use. So just to maybe if I could ask Helen, would that be okay, Helen, if you could help with the detail about the absolute timeline of decision making going forward, and whether how many other areas have been identified? But it's a slow uptake, but people do seem to be responsive to it. So I am optimistic. Helen.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think it's worth saying on that, the East Leeds, the pilot in East Leeds is very much something that we're using to learn and grow and develop, and it's then about how we use those lessons going forward. As part of our bus service improvement plan, we have included a further 5 demand responsive transport services, one in each district. Obviously, as Mayor has said previously, we are still awaiting our funding announcement for BSIP, and dependent on what that funding announcement says will therefore determine how many or much or whatever we do next in terms of the rollout of demand responsive transport. If we, depending on our funding settlement, if we are successful and do and therefore do deliver more demand responsive transport, and we would look to be doing so over the next 5 years, and that is because that is when the funding allocation is for.
Thank you so much, Helen. So obviously bearing in mind that this extra service we are paying for, so we need to make sure that the funding is there, but we have ambitions absolutely to use technology and to use different ways of getting people about. But I am pleased so far with the take up, and my hope as well, if I just may add, is the extension of the bus usage is important to me, because we heard, didn't we, that tragic tale of a group of workers getting to an out of town place of work, and the only way they could afford to get there, because there was no bus service, was for one of them to drive, and the car was packed and one of the workers was in the boot. We can't, that is completely unacceptable. So we're absolutely focused on making sure that everybody who needs to get to work, who needs to go shopping or go to see a relative, has access to a bus service in whatever way that is offered. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, who's next? Councillor Foster.
Thank you. If I may, I've got a number of questions, but just tell me to stop when you've had enough of me.
Are they all bus related?
They are, yes, they are all bus related. So recently there's been quite significant fare increases certainly across our part of West Yorkshire. What we've been trying to find out how those have affected other areas in West Yorkshire as well. I know they certainly affected Halifax, and the price of tickets has gone up substantially, particularly for season tickets of any description, so even day tickets, week tickets, monthly tickets, pushing buses to be even more unaffordable than they already were. When you couple that with the acute unreliability of some buses and the so-called temporary change, I say so-called because I wonder if they'll ever go back, to bus timetables to reduce the number of services, it is no wonder at all that people take to their cars. How can we get people to see the buses as an alternative to taking their car? When, I mean, I guess it's almost a rhetorical question. How on earth do we get people to see buses as an alternative when they are expensive and unreliable, and sometimes not very clean either, and not very pleasant to be on? We can't address the climate change problems and the amount of traffic on our roads if we don't get people out of their cars. We're never going to get people out of the cars if they don't see public transport as an alternative. I mean, for example, the Sudbridge bus, the 579, has gone down. When I first started looking at buses several years ago, they were 6 an hour. We're now 3 an hour. The main bus for 592 from Halifax to Hebden Bridge is 4 an hour. That was also 6 an hour. 6 an hour is doable. There's a bus every 10 minutes. If you miss one, you can get another one, and you can probably still make your connection and go on to wherever you need to go to. When there aren't every 20 minutes, it's not going to happen. It's really, really poor. So how can we improve that, and what can you do to help?
Thanks. Well, I absolutely share your frustration. When I'm stood at the bus stop and the bus disappears and there's another half an hour to wait, I mean, half an hour makes a massive difference, doesn't it? If it's 10 minutes, you don't have to look at the timetable on your phone. You can just go to the bus stop and a bus will come in a minute. So you're dead right. And I have written to the bus operators to share my concern, because my role is growth, that we have to see growth across this sector, not just for income for us as a transport authority, combined authority, but to tackle climate change. You're absolutely right. We need to get people out of their cars and onto buses, but why would you if they're unreliable and they're so expensive? So that's why the bus service improvement plan is so important for us, because we will then be able to invest the tap in, tap out, so people get in off and on quicker. The bus service, the bus priority lanes, so that they're not snarled up in traffic, so that you know that the bus will arrive on time. The fact that they have to be cleaner and greener is costly, so we need to persuade our partners, the bus companies, to invest in green and clean buses with support from us and working as a partnership. But you're dead right. This is a priority for us. And that's why I've written to the bus companies. I've also written to government, because part of the problem with the change in the timetable and the service is that government supported our bus companies during the pandemic to keep running. We, as a combined authority, also supported them to the tune of tens of millions, I have to say, to keep those services going. So all our key workers could get to work, students could get to college, that people could move around the region, even though we were in restrictions. So there's been a real financial hit that we have carried. And now the government have yet to say whether the money for the bus networks that's supporting them is going to continue after March. We can't wait for government, because the bus companies plan six weeks ahead their timetables. So already they're reducing timetables because they're not sure whether money is going to come from government to support them with the low patronage. So I've written to ministers and said, you have to tell us whether this money is forthcoming, because we're seeing an attrition of services already, because bus companies are trying to get ahead of the curve. So rest assured, I'm keeping my foot on the pedal, pressurizing bus companies. One, it's counterintuitive to increase your fares when we're trying to improve growth, because people are not going to get on a bus if it's going to be more expensive. And also to make sure that government are aware that we are very concerned. But it's really important that we make that imperative, that it's cheaper and faster to use a bus than to use your car. So I really feel your anxiety, but please be reassured, we're keeping up the pressure.
Thank you for that, Dot, and thank you, Tracy. And you've just brought up a subject that's quite dear to my heart. We obviously have a problem with timetables and accessibility. What is your plan to help people who can't access timetables, whether that's because of their neurodiversity or whether they're elderly and they don't have a mobile phone? And what can we do to support those people who really still need access to public transport, whether it's for doctors and health service and all of that kind of stuff? And they would just like to find out when the next bus is. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I agree that if we want buses to work, everybody should have access to the bus network. So there's a couple of things I just want to draw your attention to, which is part of the network navigation project. We've got real-time information screens, which are helpful, and audio applications to bus stops across West Yorkshire. This gives us 500 real-time units across Wakefield, Kirklees, Bradford and Calderdale. We've already got 458 in Leeds, but we're rolling them out across the region. And what's important for me when I land at a bus stop is I need to know when the next bus is. Because of COVID timetable changes, the printed timetables were taken away, which I thought was really unhelpful. And there was an expectation that you use the QR code on your phone, but that's not everybody, is it? They don't all have smartphones and an ability to use that. So those timetables are going back in. So you'll see those going back into bus stops. We've got live tracking via the M-Card app, audio-visual information on all buses, and further provision of real-time information across the screens across the region. But if I may say, equality, inclusivity and diversity is at the heart of everything I want to do for our region. And that's why we are about to announce the job description for our inclusivity champion. It's a really senior role, working with me as the mayor, having support from the combined authority to absolutely oversee every policy. Everything that I do includes accessibility and inclusivity, because we are only as strong as our weakest citizens. So we need to make sure that everybody has access to all the great opportunities. But we have put more into the bus service improvement plan, and we will be making sure that that's a priority going forward. But thank you for raising it. It's really vital.
That's great. That's really exciting to hear you say that, Tracy. I've worked with people with learning disability for many years, and I know what a huge impact that'll have on their lives.
Chair.
So that is great to hear. Okay.
Chair,
If I may just say, Dave would like to come in, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point you made, Chair, about people with learning difficulties or neurodiversity issues, that sort of thing. It's just to remember that we do have a telephone contact centre and have for many years, and that if somebody wants to speak to a real person to get some information, we have that in our Metroline service, and we shouldn't, whilst we're rolling out often technology-led solutions, we are still keeping the sort of traditional person at the other end of the phone. So that is there for people.
That's great. Thanks for that, Dave. That's really, really good reminder to all of us that there's still somebody at the end of the phone. Okay, Councillor Clark, I can see you're indicating. Have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Question just relating to the wider sort of ticketing and rail service for buses. Mayor, you've said on a number of occasions that you're wanting a much simpler structure for fares, and I want to sort of understand the scope of that. Whether we're looking at a full Oyster model in terms of what London has, or whether it's just a more soft touch, tinkering around the edges, trying to make it a little bit easier. I think the combined authority is in dire need of a much more combined and joined up simpler fare system, possibly with rail, possibly with other sorts of transport, which I think would be quite useful. My second question is on a particular infrastructure project within my ward in terms of Craven. The bridge over the A629 between Steeton and Silsden is a vital infrastructure project for the people of my ward. It has been raised by Roy Moore MP and the Bradford Council Executive, and the funding, I believe, has come from central government. My question is there a commitment from yourself, Mayor, to make sure that that and vital other infrastructure projects are seen to completion?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Regarding the Oyster, it's so simple, isn't it? You tap in, you tap out, and it's capped, and it's integrated across London. Now, we've got a long way to go to catch up with London. We do have the M card, where we are working really hard with the operators to try and ensure that the M card is seen as something that potentially could be used as our version of the Oyster. Now, of course, you can still use your bank card, but for me, part of the problem is someone will get on a bus and they want to go somewhere, but they don't know, the driver may not know either, the cheapest fare, the most efficient way to get there. So I think there needs to be more of a simplification as well about fare structures. And part of our problem is that some companies charge more than others for similar routes. So there's a lot of research that needs to go into planning a journey, trying to identify the cheapest way. So we are doing a fair bit of the backroom work, trying to support the bus companies with that tap in, tap out tech. But also, as I say, and I know it's frustrating, Councillor, to keep saying the bus service improvement plan, but there are elements of that we'll be looking into, that integrated model, and of course being able to cross it into rail as well is going to be important, and that's what I'm hoping for the mass transit system, which of course is not a mass transit just for Leeds, it's a mass transit for the whole of West Yorkshire. So that will be absolutely integrated, whether you're on the tram, whether you're on a bus, or then light rail. It's really important. But with regard to your particular constituency issue, I wonder whether my colleague Dave could come in on the A62, the Silsden question.
To be perfectly honest, I struggle a little bit on that one, because I'm not close to individual projects that we have in the pipelines. But I think what we can do is get back to Councillor with a little bit more detail rather than me improvise.
Thank you, Dave. And
okay, Dave. We don't expect you to know everything.
Yes, I passed to you in the hope that you could help me out. But I also want to reassure you, Councillor Clark, that the infrastructure projects that work for our communities, that help our communities get about, get to work and get to opportunity, is a priority for me. We can't have talented folk being unable to get to life chances. So we'll provide you with a more detailed breakdown on the A62 Silsden bypass, is it?
The A629 bridge between
the A629.
Yeah. But my question is, like I say, do I have your assurance that you'll do everything you can to make sure that project is completed?
Councillor Clark, you would hate me to promise something without oversight of what I'm promising. So let me have a little look at that, and we can get directly back to you. But thank you for alerting me to it.
Well played. Right, okay, let's move on. I know that I'm going to have one last question on buses, and that is from Councillor Wood. Would you like to come in?
Hello there. Thank you for joining us today, Tracy. You just in your last response highlighted something that I wanted to make sure, and you said that these things won't just be happening in Leeds, and I'm requesting to you that when we get these new innovative services and ideas, that it won't automatically be tried out in Leeds, but all areas will be considered, because Leeds isn't the centre of everything, and we all need help.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. And I'm the Mayor of West Yorkshire. I'm not the Mayor of Leeds. So also being a representative of a community in Kirklees, I understand the challenges of having a core city. And for our community in Batley and Spen, it was that Huddersfield got everything. There was that constant refrain that it's not fair. But what's very important is that Leeds must flourish for us all to do well. Of course it must. You know, we've got the Infrastructure Bank, we've got the Bank of England, Channel 4. We are a magnet for talent, but that talent may want to live in Hebden Bridge because it's fantastic to live in Hebden Bridge. But I must also make it possible for you to live in Hebden Bridge and get to your place of work, but also for businesses in Hebden Bridge to attract talent from Leeds to go and work in Hebden. So it is about my role to do our own levelling up. We have, I have a responsibility that I often say this, that a young boy born in Ilkley, for example, a child born in Ilkley today could potentially live 10 healthy years longer than a child born in Dewsbury. That's why my inclusivity champion is so important to me. We have to do our own levelling up, whether that's opportunity, health inequality, access to skills training, jobs, whilst also expecting our government to do it for the whole country. So I haven't got my eye off the ball, be reassured.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay,
Chair, I just wanted to add a little
Dave.
A bit of clarity into that as well, just to explain a little. I can see how some members feel that there's quite a lot of schemes happening in Leeds compared to other places, and that there is a little bit of a subtext to and reason for that. About 5 years ago, government made some transport funding available specifically for the City of Leeds, and some of the schemes we're seeing, including the East Leeds Flexibus that's been mentioned earlier, are a product of that. That was a bit of a forerunner for something called Transforming Cities programme, and now we have Transforming Cities programme funding that covers all of West Yorkshire, and in fact is particularly sort of targeted at the areas that aren't Leeds. And so we are in this sort of cycle of schemes on the ground being delivered in Leeds at the moment, and schemes being planned as follow-ups in West Yorkshire, and that's why it probably feels a little bit Leeds-centric in terms of things you might see being launched and opened, but that's the consequence of government giving a bit of money to Leeds and then following that up with the Transform Cities Fund for a wider area.
Thank you for that clarity, Dave. That's really helpful. So all the roadworks and the schemes that you see going on in Leeds are coming to an end of this funding bid, and there are now opportunities for the rest of the region. But also, you have leaders across the region who are really powerful champions for their communities. So they are always making the case that this is about access for everybody across the region.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. We are running over on this item. So, Mass Transit Vision 2040 and Connectivity Infrastructure Plan is our next heading. And I'm sure most of you are aware that we are one of the largest regions that does not have a mass transit system, and the government have pledged to give us some money to fix this. So, firstly, Mayor, could you explain to us what is mass transit? Because some people really might not know that, especially if you're watching here online. So thank you.
Thank you. But as you say, Chair, we are a city, the only city in Europe of this size that does not have a mass transit system. And you only have to go to Dublin or Manchester to see how impactful having a tram system is for people getting around the region. So I am really excited that it was in the Conservative Party manifesto, Mass Transit for Leeds. We have been allocated 200 million to start the early works of mass transit. And currently, it is a loop structure that goes north, south, east, west, around and into Leeds region. But let's not forget, it is also about getting out to outside of Leeds. So the mass transit plan at the moment, it's not. It will obviously need consultation and public engagement, but currently it also goes Heckmondwike, Cleckheaton up to Bradford, which is certainly something I'm very pleased to see, because I really felt that those links to Bradford from that part of our community were really underserved. So there is a plan in place. We've done a great deal of investigation, and many people on this call will remember many years of discussions about mass transit. But the Combined Authority went out to look at best practice around the world, to look at the best tech, the greenest, the most cost effective, and we've come up with a loose plan that will be then developed further. Now we have a small number in the team, the mass transit team, but because we have this funding from government, we are now opening that up to recruitment so we can turbocharge that work. And we have that vision for 2040. We published that in January 2021. So if I could say, Chair, it might be something for your members, if they haven't, to have a look at, because that does set out the corridors of potential opportunity and the shortlisted technology. Now, decision on tech and routes have not been taken, so we're still in that discussion phase. Obviously, the next phase is going to start September, autumn 2022. So I can't imagine there's going to be spades in the ground before my next election, but I definitely know there will be spades in the ground. Hopefully, if I'm re-elected, we will be definitely on the way to delivering mass transit for West Yorkshire. Dave, I wonder if you could come in with a bit more detail to support me, and then I don't know if Helen, if you've anything further to add.
I've just got a question about the technology, just to come back to what you were talking about, because I read that you're using a blend of technologies on page 37, figure 2.11. If you can explain what technology is, because it kind of sounded a bit Star Trek-y. It's like, are we in teleportation mode here? And then you mentioned a loop, and I was thinking, is that the Hyperloop? The Elton
No, that is definitely not the Hyperloop.
Back train and stuff, you know, I mean,
No,
it's high-tech stuff, but, you know, I don't know how far you've been, where you've been to consult. So, yeah, if you can just explain to us, I'm sure, you know, you mean buses, trains and stuff, but if you could just explain to us what technology you're referring to, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, the actual tram itself, what we need is we need it to be future-proof. So we weren't certain when government were going to give us the money. So what we didn't want to do is decide on, I don't know, batteries, and then have to wait 5 years for the money from government when hydrogen is a better option, or, you know, another tech option or solution. But as you say, this is not just about the route across the region, it is about the connectivity, so that you are able to come out of your house, get a bus to the station, get off out of the station, jump on the tram, get off the tram and pick up an electric bike to get you to the final destination, the last mile. So it is about making that route as seamless as possible. But Dave and Helen, if I could bring you both in on the tech side of things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maren. I think you summarised most of what I was just going to add to what you were saying. But I think as part of the mass transit vision, which was first published for kind of engagement last January, within that there was also conversations of what we mean by technology, as you've just rightly pointed out, Chair. But we are therefore going to approval for that vision document at the Combined Authority meeting in March. And that is following the outcomes of the conversations over the engagement period. In terms of technology specifically, what we wanted to do was we wanted to keep this as an open discussion through that vision, and understanding therefore what the right mode is, you like, for the right kind of location. As Mary's just described, that might be a bus or it might be a train, enhancing whatever it is, it's enhancing capacity. And a tram is part of that as well. So that process is ongoing, and now we have also, as the Mayor's just spoken through, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement work, and the finalisation of that business case is also starting our process further. That's provided an additional funding to help us further develop and start delivery of this process, and that's really our next step. So it's a 5-year funding settlement for the whole of the settlement, and then therefore there are conversations that need to be had to continue the funding after that point. The funding we receive through this first settlement won't deliver the whole of mass transit, it will just deliver a first section of that.
If I may jump in, Chair, thank you, Helen, but also just to let you know that I have written to the Minister to say this can't be piecemeal. This has to be, you have to be with us for the long haul, because it can't be a half-built white elephant. Whatever the stripe of the government, we have to have that commitment that we will deliver. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Needless to say, sadly, I haven't had to reply to that letter, but I'm still making the case that government, once they've fired the gun, we need to be absolutely reassured that that funding will start to come as we need it.
Thank you. I'm just aware of time. Can I bring in one of our members? So, Councillor Smith, would you like to ask your question? I think you were first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it's half of my question has been answered, because I was concerned about the long-term funding for the project, and, you know, spending a couple of £100 million is going to get you practically nowhere, and then what happens after that? So I think you've addressed some of that, and it's glad to know, Tracy, that you're pressing the relevant ministers. So thank you for that. I am a fan of mass transport. I've got family on the other side of the Pennines, and I do spend some time in Manchester, and jumping off the train and being able to use your ticket on the tram and get around the city is fantastic. What I have seen over the hill, as it were, is that as that network has expanded, that's been great, but there is something of a danger of sucking people out of those areas and into other areas from an economic point of view. And we've also seen instances of where the tram system has replaced existing rail services, and routes into Manchester have become slower and more expensive. So just thoughts, really.
Thanks for sharing those.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. We've got to get it. We've got to get the balance right.
Okay, Councillor Fenton, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tracy. I suppose just a plea really in terms of, alongside the sort of cutting edge technology, I think for any mass transit system to where there's some fairly simple and low cost things that can be done. For example, helping people get to a bus stop by having infrastructure to park a bicycle near a bus stop. That's sort of fairly straightforward, but you'd be surprised. I'm sure many of the members have been in a similar position. You cycle to the bus stop, end up sort of chaining your bike to any infrastructure that that is handy. So I think there is there's opportunity there for some potentially some quick wins, and I'd encourage you to bear those in mind, and also to, in developing the mass transit proposals, look at some of the work that Transport for the North did. They started developing a sort of multimodal smart ticketing system across the whole north of England. Sadly, government pulled the plug on that this time last year, which perhaps is a bit of a warning that the more
I think we've lost you, Councillor Fenton. Okay.
If I may just add, Councillor Fenton, absolutely right about that connectivity. But Transport for the North, of which I'm a member, has done a lot of really good work about how to bring us together. Unfortunately, the announcement of the Integrated Rail Plan also suggested that the government wanted further distance from Transport for the North, that they weren't going to be part of the process of delivering the IRPs in the same way. So I'm making the case that we need to be nearer those decisions, because we know our region, we know what we need. A stranger in Whitehall doesn't necessarily know what we need for our community. So I'm still making that case that the TfN have got a role to play to support government thinking. So rest assured, we're aware of the potential breakdown in the relationship can't happen. We need to work with government as best we can.
Thank you, Tracy. And can I bring in Councillor Finnegan, please?
Thank you, Chair. They say if you sit around long enough, things come past you again and again and again. Having sat through the Supertram debacle in the late 90s, £40 million spent, not an inch of rail actually laid, and the NGT during the 2000s, why do we think we're going to be third time lucky on this? And won't our efforts be better placed, making sure we have a proper mass transit system that's based on buses by re-regulating them? Thank you.
Councillor Finnegan, thank you. And I admire your determination and commitment to public control. I'm with you all the way. However, I think we are in a different place. We've got government commitment. It's in their manifesto. They've allocated the 200 million. This is not about either or, and certainly London never has to choose, does it? It doesn't have to choose, can we invest in buses or can we invest in Crossrail? We shouldn't be in that position. I want to make buses better now, today, so that when when mass transit is built, we have that integrated system that you can get a bus to the mass transit stop on the tram, or you can take your bike on the tram and then pick up a bus on the other side. It isn't an either or. It's not a, you know, it's really important that we don't get reduced by government to just demanding one particular thing. It is, we're going for this. I really believe that government are supporting us so far, and I also believe we can make the bus service better whilst we do that work that needs to be done. That isn't because I want to delay it, because I want to be annoying. It's because government have put us in this position where we have to, if we want to do it properly and also protect ourselves from potential lawsuits and ending up in the courts, we have to do it properly. Doing it properly means we have to go through a process, and that process will lead us to 2024. We'll be able to see where we're at and make that decision then. And we will have done all our due diligence. We'll have crossed the T's and dotted the I's, and maybe and be able to make that case while also having better bus services for our citizens today. But I'm with you on that, the despair around the offer we have currently on buses.
Well, we're all rooting for you, Tracy. We are. Okay, so in a connection to that, my last question is, so from the feedback in the mass transit consultation, and bear in mind, like, we can only use the footfall in Leeds at the moment. So according to page 10, figure 2.5, if you're wondering where I'm referring to, do we still need high capacity mass transit network? So some people on figure 2.13, some people said that they've pointed out that there's been a reduced demand, obviously post-pandemic travel. So I know that that's only sort of a 25% reduction, but I'm just wondering, I'm being the critical friend, does that have an impact in the capacity, like whether we do high capacity or a low capacity? I'm not sure if you know the answer to that I'll ask you.
No, thank you, Chair. We have seen a reduction, there's no doubt about it. We're not sure when we're going to get to pre-pandemic levels, because if ever, because of the changed nature of the world of work. But with regard to the capacity footfall issue, my worry is that when we are approaching government, we've got this money for the city region sustainable transport settlement. That money is also dependent on us providing match funding, which would normally come from fares and the fare box, but we don't have a mass transit to get money from that fare box. So we are in a unique position, and I have made this case to the ministers that they need to accept that we, of all the regions, don't yet have a mass transit system to access future funding from. But if I could potentially bring in Dave, if you'd be happy to talk to that high capacity issue. Or is it something you could take offline, Dave?
No. Sorry, I was just having difficulty with the button. It's a fair challenge in one sense that travel behaviours and habits have been affected by the pandemic. We can expect there to be more remote working in the future than we had before. But as we sit here, it's very, very difficult to predict how that's going to work out. And to a certain extent, we've got the economic viability of our towns and cities as well as locations. So I think what we have noticed through the pandemic is that whilst it has had an effect on reducing journeys, at one stage before the Omicron hit, we were looking at approaching 80% of bus patronage back. A little bit less on rail, but then we also saw a lot more off-peak travel and weekend travel on rail. So I think what that tells you is there's still demand. yes, there might be a bit of a marginal impact, and some people might not commute 5 days a week in the future. But I think that the demand is still there. There's still an awful lot of journeys people are making by public transport, even as we speak at the moment. So I think it's probably a little bit premature to second guess how things are going to go in that sense.
And if I may just add, Chair, thank you, Dave, that we're doing all we can to increase capacity. So Free Bus Sunday, it was, as you know, really pouring down, 13% additional footfall. We had the £1 Boxing Day offer over the summer. We have a cheaper ticket for young people that actually has been quite compelling, and before Omicron we got almost back to pre-pandemic numbers for young people. So we're trying to innovate to get people back on the bus, and obviously we'll see going forward next week, now people have been instructed to go back to work, how that impacts.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely having a major impact, isn't it, on all of our lives. Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is rail. And since we've heard the shocking news of the loss of HS2 plan back in November, I'm sure members have got some questions on this subject. Okay, so has anyone got any HS2 or HS3 questions? Councillor Fenton, would you like to begin?
Thank you. I'll try not to disappear this time. I think the announcement in relation to Northern Powerhouse Rail was, I suppose, in many ways as big a blow, if not a bigger blow, than the HS2 announcement. So I just wondered what the Mayor, in conjunction with other combined authority mayors, what representations you have made and are able to make to try and salvage something from the announcement that was made to try and retain some of that additional capacity and connectivity, particularly for those parts of the city region that are poorly served at the moment. It'd be useful to have your sense of where we are on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. I mean, you have to ask what government are thinking when they talk about levelling up and then they disregard Bradford. And the fact it had been promised in public, in their manifesto, again and again, reassured that we were going to get Northern Powerhouse Rail from Manchester to Leeds. And then we got absolutely nothing. We got TransPennine upgrade, which is very, very welcome. Obviously, will give us enormous disruption, but we're prepared to sit with that disruption for the electrification. But this isn't just about speed, and the government are very focused on speed, and they're saying, well, don't worry about Northern Powerhouse Rail because we can get you from Bradford to Leeds in 12 minutes. Well, it's technically very difficult because currently those trains have to reverse out up a hill. But also, if you're going in 12 minutes between Bradford and Leeds, that would suggest there's no stopping trains. None at all. It's just a direct city-to-city train. For me, our challenge is connectivity and capacity. So that's why NPR, that Northern Powerhouse Rail extra railway line, is vital, and the same is true of HS2. And I know there'll be colleagues from Wakefield that will feel that they saw no benefit to HS2, but that second line gives us a chance to get better connectivity between smaller communities. So it just beggars belief, doesn't it? And I must say, I just don't quite understand what happened when almost the week before, government was still promising Northern Powerhouse Rail. I can only assume we were collateral damage between number 10 and number 11, and number 10 lost the fight. So we don't give up. We will continue to make that case about connectivity between Manchester and Leeds with a stop in Bradford. And we are meeting as our core city partners to look at next steps. Now, my concern is government said the 96 billion, that's the end of it. There's not a penny more. But we've, as Transport for the North, as the mayors have said, well, can we look, if it's about cost, can we look at how we potentially with land value uplift, is there something we could do there? How can we just get more wiggle room to say this isn't the end of the story? I must say, I am not impressed with the current Transport Minister's response to our pushback on the front of the Yorkshire Post saying it was irrational. And also he wrote to me privately saying that he was very disappointed that I called this a betrayal, which I found quite odd. I'm a voice of my community. We were promised again and again something that hasn't been delivered. It feels like a betrayal to me. So we don't give up. We are going to find a solution. The people of Bradford and the people of West Yorkshire deserve that connectivity. And we know that the Labour Party have promised NPR in full, HS2 in full. So we'll see where we get to, obviously, in the electoral cycle. But, you know, these things don't come easy. Nothing good was ever given to us. So we will always have to fight for it. And I'll continue to do that for the people of West Yorkshire.
Thank you, Tracy. We were certainly offered that silk purse and we got the sow's ear, didn't we? It's not good at all. Okay, so any other questions? Councillor Finnegan, would you like to be next?
Thanks very much. I'm a big fan of the TransPennine upgrade. I think that's good for the region. I think it's much better value and will provide more economic improvement than HS2. I remain unconvinced with HS2. But this is specifically about Morley train station. Morley train station does not have disabled access. If you get on a train one side of Morley, then you have to go all the way to Dewsbury to get back off the same side. So the disabled access has been poor and unavailable for years and years and years. We keep getting told that something's coming that's going to be addressed. We're going to have a new station. We're going to have movement of the platforms, and we're going to have long last disabled access. Can the Metro Mayor tell me when?
Well, thanks, Councillor Finnegan. And you raised an issue that is actually a bigger issue across West Yorkshire, that we have stations like Batley, Marsden that don't have disabled access. And in fact, when I was an MP, I was working with a Paralympian who got stuck at Dewsbury, and the lift was broken. Nobody was answering the support line, and he was there for a number of hours, freezing cold in the rain. Finally, somebody answered, and they stopped a train that shouldn't be stopped. It was a through train, and they stopped the train. They put him on the train to Leeds and then got him a taxi back to Batley. It's not acceptable. Now, there is a programme from government that is about making stations accessible. We are determined, and this is where I just reiterate the inclusivity champion, to look at every aspect of our community where we can act swiftly. I want to just bring in Dave, who might have a timeline for you regarding Morley specifically, but this is not just a Morley problem. This is about Victorian infrastructure that hasn't had a penny of investment for decades, because we have been underinvested in for decades around our infrastructure. And it's time that we got our fair slice of the pie so that everybody could get around our region. So Dave, if you wanted to be more specific.
I'll try, but we're not absolutely certain ourselves, to be honest. I mean, I think Councillor Finnegan's pointed out that there have been plans to, particularly regarding to Morley and the accessibility of stations in between Leeds and Dewsbury as part of the TransPennine route upgrade. And as far as we're aware, it's still part of that programme. When it'll happen and the sequence it'll happen is still a bit unknown, because we're waiting for Network Rail to develop further what the the plan for the transparent route upgrade and the various different parts of it. So I think we're reasonably sure that it's in the scheme somewhere. But I think as Councillor Finnegan mentioned, that does involve moving the station a little bit further towards Leeds to take a little bit out of the deep cutting that it's in, to be able to get a better access to it. So we'll, as soon as we know more, we'll make sure that the members in the respective areas affected, served by those stations, are kept up to date. But I think it's coming, but there's nothing, and there's no definite timescale at this stage.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up my previously asked question about electrification of Calder Valley Line, and also just briefly mention on the topic of accessibility, the lift at Halifax Station, which by all accounts seems to be broken more often than not, and the fact that Todmorden has been waiting, I think, from discussion with colleagues the other day, 8 years at least for a lift to one platform. One platform is accessible, the other isn't, and it's just ridiculous. So I just wanted to add those two into the mix of discussion on accessibility at the stations. Obviously, Halifax Station has got a big plan in place for improvements, but if they could fix the lift so that it works all the time in the meantime, that would be really helpful. But yeah, the big one is electrification of the Calder Valley Line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And the electrification of the Calder Valley Line, it seems like a no-brainer to me, particularly if you need additional capacity because of the excuse me, Trans-Pennine upgrade. It would be really useful to have the Calder Valley Line upgraded. All of our creaking infrastructure needs investment, and please be reassured that I've written specifically to ministers about the Calder Valley Line, because it would be straightforward, and it would be so impactful for that community. And as you're saying about lifts, you're so right that all of our stations need to be accessible, but we need the funding in order to do it. And government have not given us the resources we've needed over the last decade or so, and we've been sat waiting. So please be reassured, I'm making the case for your constituents.
Thank you. Can I just ask Tracy quickly, did you get a response from ministers when you wrote to them?
No. But can I just reassure you that's not unusual. At the moment, there is a common problem with communication with government, that it's not just me, it's mayors generally. They seem to be rowing back on their love for devolution, but I'm happy to work with them. We're working to deliver for the priorities for West Yorkshire. So it's just frustrating, but I try not to take it personally.
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite hard being the very first female mayor. Okay, so let's ask, there's one more question. Dave, you're still indicating. Have you got something you would like to add to the discussion?
Oh, sorry, I'll put it down.
That's okay. Okay, so I've just got one more question, which is going back to how we count people and patronage and stuff. So if Leeds is going to be the only place where we're going to measure footfall in the region currently, to develop a reliable picture of our rail patronage, then don't we need other stations to be covered? So like major ones like, Wakefield, Bradford, Halifax, Huddersfield, where when can we see that measuring equipment being installed by the rail industry so that we can make decisions based on accurate data, which has a broader catchment area and reliability, validity? Dave, I'm sure.
Well, I would like to say thank you, Chair, for raising that, and it's something I'm going to look into. I don't know, Dave, if you want to comment, but it may be a question of cost, but maybe Dave can fill us in.
Thank you.
Yes, I think there are so many unknowns, isn't there, at this particular stage, and we are working through the different sort of funding provisions that we're getting from government. So I think as hopefully as the year progresses, we can get a little bit more clarity around this.
But we'll take that away, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just obviously I'm aware, we need a West Yorkshire picture, don't we? We really do. It's not just one station or another. It's like Leeds is definitely not going to give us the picture of everywhere. So, okay, great. Let's time. It's 11:42. Let's move on to active travel. And I think Councillor Smith, you might have had a question on active travel. Would you like to come into that?
I do indeed. Thank you, Chair. Mayor, we have particular challenges in Kirklees with cycling and walking due to our topography and the built environment. If I may, I'd just like to start with a specific case study, but one which I understand from speaking to colleagues is a theme that's repeated across Kirklees in particular. And it's in respect of the active travel plans for the A629 upgrade, and particular section C. And the feedback from residents we've had is that whilst everybody seems to be broadly in support of the aims of active travel, there are serious concerns over routes, engineering works to roads to introduce cycle and shared cycle and pedestrian routes. These concerns include safety, the negative impact on residents, the knock-on effects on increasing congestion in surrounding roads, a lack of meaningful consultation, a feeling that the full information is not being made available to members of the public. For example, only summaries of surveys and business cases are available, and seems to be a lack of evidence that the works will be effective in actually significantly increasing uptake of active travel. So I'd like to know, how do we strike a balance between our ambition to encourage active travel and the concerns of residents and enable effective consultation that brings people with us? And what power and influence can you bring to bear on this? And what do you think, do you think that major engineering is perhaps always the best way to use our resources?
Thank you for that thorough question. I'm not across the A629 upgrade myself, but just more generally on active travel. We do have a challenge, don't we? I borrowed one of the Combined Authority electric bikes, and I struggled because it's hard to commute with an electric bike because they're heavy. So then you have to go long distances. And are the roads safe enough for you to do that? So it is challenging, and the topography of the roads, you will need an electric bike if you're not an Olympian, because it is quite, our terrain is quite challenging. So it is tricky for us, but this has got to be the way forward if we are to hit those climate targets, because we need people out of their cars. It's about well-being, it's about health, and it's about a pleasurable way to travel. Now, you can't travel safely on some of our roads. Manchester Road, for example, in Kirklees, a really busy road, lots of heavy wagons, and no demarcation for cyclists. So incredibly dangerous. And that's why I've been really excited about some of the work we've been doing on canal sides. And there's a piece of work in Kirklees that we're doing between Marsden and Huddersfield, for example, making the canal side more attractive and safe, of course, when it's dark, etc. So it is about a balance. I'll take away your concerns about the consultation, and of course it's something I could raise with the leader of Kirklees if there's something that you specifically are very, very concerned about. Could I just ask, have you raised it at the leader level?
Yeah, we have. We've tried to engage. We've tried to get engagement. We have strong feedback from local residents. It's a bit perplexing. I mean, you mentioned Manchester Road. It's a bit perplexing that spending £25 million on a scheme to upgrade the route between Halifax and Huddersfield, which is welcome. Everybody welcomes it. But I don't understand why safe cycling can't be engineered into the main road. I mean, we've had feedbacks from cyclists who say, the proposed route You know, if you're going from Halifax to Huddersfield, you're going to go down the main road anyway. We're not proposing to stop bikes using. This part of the scheme seems to anybody that cares to have a look into the detail and come and walk the streets ill-conceived. And I'd like to extend an invitation to you, Tracy, to just come and visit us in Lindley and just have a look and maybe chat with a couple of residents and get a feeling for the actual layout of the roads, the topography, and the challenges that people are going to have to face, not just on those streets, but on surrounding streets. We all want safe roads. We all want opportunities for active travel, but people are not going to pedal a bike up some of these roads. So we have real concerns, and I would be extremely grateful if you could raise this yourself with Councillor Pandor and maybe come and see us.
Have you raised it with your Member of Parliament? I mean, we all want active travel. I'm not going to get away from this, Councillor Smith. I'm a real champion for active travel. So it may be something that is a bit of a short bit of pain for a lot of gain. So I'm not across it. But who's your Member of Parliament? It's
Jess McCartney. And there's a wider issue here about our engagement with the public. We've just been through one of two consultations, which are not consultations. It doesn't appear to anybody that was involved in that they were looking for feedback from members of the public. You know, it was an online meeting. People had challenges getting onto the meetings. You know, I know we've got Omicron and all the rest of it, but that sort of engagement on an issue like this is just not going to work. And people feel that things are being done to them and not with them. We're not bringing people with us. We're not making the argument. We're using the same old the same old lines to try and justify the scheme without addressing any of the concerns of the residents. And that's a wider theme that we need to take back when we're trying to bring people with us.
Thank you. So consultations have been done, Councillor?
They're in the process. There was one.
Oh, they're in the process.
Yeah, yeah, but they are sterile and ineffective.
Okay, I think this is a particularly important issue for you, Councillor, and I'm sure that there will be avenues for you to raise it with the leaders initially. I am a fan of active travel, so it'd be interesting to understand a little bit more, and I'll take that away if you're happy with that.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. I think that this is a general. I mean, we've looked at some of these issues within transport scrutiny already, and the main subject title here really is behaviour change. I know you've talked about that before. So if cars and vans contribute to 90% of our emissions, you know, the behaviour change required to motivate people, which I think is what Councillor Smith is referring to be able to access active travel. We still need to look at, you know, how we're going to change behaviour. So motivators are the drivers, psychological drivers. I'm just using the word active travel because it's better for you or whatever else. I mean, as you've pointed out, we have some very steep inclines in some of our areas, and there's absolutely no way we can get even electric bikes up especially some of the hills in Calderdale. So, and I know that there's that grey area of the cross between the electric bike and the motorbike, and there's going to be some I think it's really interesting. I've just spoken to the members just before you came on, Tracy. I'll just give you some figures that were given to me at I went to a motorbike live event over at the Birmingham NEC. I'm not a motorbiker at all, but I thought it was a really interesting concept because you've got people like Porsche and BMW now providing these electric bikes that are a sort of a really fine line between cycling and motorcycling. So I'm just going to give you these figures. So in the distance travelled by motorcyclists in Yorkshire and the Humber is 0.2 billion miles. Okay, that's a lot of miles, and there's over 115 currently licensed motorcycles in the region, which is 3.7% of all registered vehicles. And the studies show that 10% shift of modal travel from cars to motorcycles, I'm going to say motorcycles, but they could be electric bikes, basically, that do over 15 miles an hour, and have got the capacity to get up some of those hills as well. if we had a 10% shift, it would reduce congestion for all road users by 40%. I had no idea that that was the potential impact. And then you're significantly reducing the emissions and air pollution there as well. And people apparently who ride motorbikes are less stressed. I don't know how true that is either, but these are the studies that were quoted to me. And I just think there's something in that. I was similar to Councillor Smith. I've been involved in an active travel project consultation over here. It was only a couple of days ago, and we're talking about closing the roads, moving car parking spaces out, and basically making people walk. And I think, as Councillor Smith's saying, if people feel like they're being done to, they're not going to come with you. Okay, and then we've also got to think about the people like who are disabled, the mums with babies who've got loads of kids in the car that you've got your shopping in the car. How are you gonna move all of that around with small children? And then obviously, disabled people and elderly people as well. If we move all of these car parking spaces out so we can have the safer schools and active travel and all that, I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm absolutely up for it. But I think we have to find ways of motivating people. What are the key drivers? What can we do to incentivise people into active travel, as opposed to it just being done to, people feeling as if they're being done to? So, yeah, I've got similar concerns. Sorry about that rant, but I do feel as if it's so easy for us to get into that. Oh yeah, we're going to do it. And actually, because we're talking to our residents. I don't know if anybody else has got anything else that they would like to add along that.
I'm just wondering if I can come in, Councillor Amanda.
Please.
Chair.
Thank you.
Just about the active travel, I'm a really big fan of it. I think it could bring benefits in many ways, and I think we need to look at the current climate we're in. There's a lot of things that are becoming more and more expensive, so people are going to be looking at more wiser choices in terms of how they travel. So rather than going by car to the local school to drop the kids off, they might choose to walk if they're in walking distance. And in terms of active travel, I've had a positive experience in that regard. I know that we've looked at certain places where we're wanting to have cycle lanes, and it might not have been sort of the best decision, but we've consulted with people on that street or on that road, and we've had a healthy conversation and maybe changed things slightly in order to try and bring them on board with the idea. So I think there's ways around things. I don't think by completely sort of getting rid of something, it's probably the wisest choice. And you said something about incentivizing. I think a lot of the time these public consultations are not maybe taken up, or not potentially people are not engaging in that process maybe, and maybe we need to incentivize that aspect of things, so we're getting more people that are putting into the consultation process, so the decisions that are going to be made are not going to adversely impact a particular area or community. And that's my thoughts. And also the other thing, I know this is a bit off point, it is making things greener as well. And I think Tracy picked up on this point quite a few times. There is lots of evidence to suggest there's increase of respiratory illnesses when there's a highly congested area. And I think it is the right way to go, given that the current climate we are in. So I'm very supportive of this active travel, but I do understand there needs to be tweaks. But I think we need to try and encourage the public to engage more in that consultation process. And how do we get more people to engage, rather than having a few hundred engaging? How are we going to get thousands of people engaging? Because it's going to affect them at the end of the day, and they need to be engaging in that consultation process.
That's a really good point, Yusra, really good point. And we spoke to the people who were doing it in Calderdale. We decided to stand in the street and talk to people outside the schools, to just take consultation to people, because very often the people we might be talking about might not be online, they might not have access to online, so we're not hearing their voice. And so when we're door knocking them and we're hearing how angry they are about this potential situation, I think just asking people, like face to face, stand outside your local supermarket, go and speak to your residents. I think that's the only way we can actually we can get a really clear picture of those marginalised communities. Anyway, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm just looking at time. Are there any other comments that people would like to make or questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, make a couple of quick comments about things that help or hinder. Firstly, walking, pavement markers are really cheap and easy and effective tool to help people overcome the, oh my goodness, it's such a long way barrier. If you have sort of just roundels on the pavement, it's only paint saying it's a 10-minute walk from A to B, you know, from the school to Tesco or from wherever to wherever. That really, you know, it's a psychological thing. If it says, you know, if there's something that tells you it's only a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk or a 5-minute walk, whatever, then that's a really helpful tool. And I'd like to see those used much more widely, and maybe even funding for them. I mean, they're not hugely expensive to do, but you know, it does require somebody to walk along the roads and tell you how long it takes. But so there's that one. Cycle lanes are obviously hugely beneficial, but the segregated ones, white paint on the road is neither use nor ornament really. It's dangerous, it's full of debris, it's full of drain covers. It's usually not very wide either, so if you're trying to cycle in something that's only 1 metre wide or 1.5 metres at best, and you know, you can only use 1/3 of that space because the rest of it's full of crud, and then you've got the inevitable going out around the parked cars every 100 yards or however frequently. It's a detriment, and it's almost better not to have them there at all. So I'd like to see a massive move away from white painted cycle lanes into segregated cycle lanes, which will actually help people feel safe on the roads, because white paint does nothing at all. And my final point, we've got 2 very good schemes, one that links Bradford to Halifax, the Queensbury Tunnel, and the other is the Ryburn Valley Greenway, which cuts out necessity to cycle along the A58 between Sawbridge and Ripponden. The Ryburn Valley Greenway is quite well progressed, but it needs funding. Queensbury Tunnel, we have got a big worry with Heritage Railways Estate, which is run by Highways England now, and the Historic Railways Estate, sorry, because the Historic Railways Estate are basically wanting to fill pretty much everything with concrete and permanently abandon. I mean, there's 3,200 former railway structures across the length of Great Britain. They are doing immense damage to a lot of them. And it's a real battle for communities to try and keep these structures open so they can be used. Is there anything you can do to help?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Foster. I always come to these meetings and go away with so many great ideas. So thank you for sharing your ideas. And I do agree with the lack of safety. If it isn't a segregated lane, it is very worrying, isn't it, when you have to pull out outside a parked car. The Queensbury Tunnel and the Greenway, I don't think we've got time, Chair. We're on at 12 o'clock, and I've got another meeting at 12, I'm afraid. So it's something I can take away. I know that we've been doing and working with the campaign group quite substantially on the Queensbury Tunnel, and they've done an enormous amount of brilliant work to raise the profile of that potential route. So if you're happy, Councillor Foster, I can take that away.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today and dedicating this time to the role of scrutiny. I'm sure you're aware we're just your critical friend.
Absolutely. And I honestly, you are also connected to your communities in a way that I'm not. So it's also an opportunity for you to tell me what your challenges are and where we could do better. You know, you're the solution to the problems that I face. So thank you for your kindness in inviting me today.
It's been really informative debate, and we've all discovered lots of interesting facts about our travel plans for the region. So thank you again as also to all of our officers who work so hard behind the scenes and who have attended here today, and also for keeping Yorkshire moving forward. I'd like to especially thank Dave and Hannah and the Mayor's team and Policy and Communications team as well. And I'd like to extend my gratitude to Khalid and Hannah and all of my committee colleagues for your interesting and inspiring questions today. You've given us lots of food for thought there. We'll take away these answers and we'll be in touch on any other matters of interest. So thanks again, Mayor Braben, and no doubt we'll be inviting you again to our future meetings. So
thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Dave and Helen, for just having my back when I don't know what I'm talking about. So thank you.